Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning, afternoon.
Or after good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. And if you could actually type in the chat just to kind of give us an idea of where you're joining us from, that would be wonderful. This morning or this afternoon. Let's see if we have any.
Mhm.
Ah, see, we have some UK people. Awesome. Oh, over the place. So, good morning and good afternoon to everybody. And welcome to today's Hands Up Education Suburani webinar, Winter Refresher. We are going to have some Suburani users share some ideas and talk about strategies and how they approach Suburani. And it's also a great opportunity for people to ask questions if you should have any questions that you want to ask us or questions about the curriculum. My name is William Lee. I'm coming to you from San Antonio, Texas. And today we are super grateful to have two current Superani users who will talk about their experience. And also, hopefully, if you have time, then Lee Grace and I can also share something at the end. We will see. But we have Melissa Burgess and Sean Minion from Indian Hills School District joining us from Ohio. Um, their Latin department is truly amazing. I've known Melissa for over 20 years. And Sean, I met a few years ago at the Ohio State JCL convention. Um, in their program, there are three high school teachers, correct, and one middle school teacher, two middle school teachers, and two high school. There you go. Okay, but they have four Latin teachers, and Latin is offered from sixth grade all the way to AP Latin high school. Sean teaches seventh and eighth grade, and Melissa teaches at the high school level, and they are very, very knowledgeable in what they're doing. Melissa has served on various committees um, at the school as well as the national level with JCL. She and I were on the national committee together for 10 years. But their program is known for its inclusivity. They truly believe that everybody can be successful with Latin, and they're so inclusive in their programs that the fact that they have four Latin teachers for a high school that usually has a graduating class of about 200, that truly speaks for itself. And so, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Sean and Melissa so that they can share some strategies with you this morning. So, first of all, Sean and Melissa, tell us something that you have enjoyed about the Superani course.
I'll go ahead and start. The storyline to me is so compelling, and um, I love the drama behind it. I actually had some of my Latin 4 students come into my classroom recently, and I had some Suburani projected on my smartboard, and they were like, "Oh, we remember these stories." And then they're like, "Well, what happens?" And I'm like, "Oh, because we didn't get very far with them in Latin 2. And I gave them the printout of like the book 2 like synopses. And one of the girls wrote down, "These are all the chapters I want to read." So we're going to start a little just Latin reading club to go back and look at book 2 to read the stories that they think are going to be interesting. And I think that is just like the strongest testament to the impact that the high quality writing and the detail of the narrative is really compelling to students.
I think
Awesome. And Sean?
I think along those lines, the topics that go along with the story are like perfect. I feel like they hit a modern Latin student's interest, that these are questions that naturally pop up and kids get a chance to explore those. in a huge amount of resources, like all the different stories, all the different background information you can explore. I truly think that this appeals, the textbook appeals to students' interest. And also I like how the grammatical stuff is set up. I feel like it's feels more natural. I feel like I'm not teaching odd stuff that I'm like, ah, that kind of works. I'm just throwing it in. I feel like it hits my interest in the student's interest well.
And what are some things that you have worked on this semester that have gone well? Some what we call glows and grows in professional development terms. But what are some of the glows that you like to share with us?
Um, One of the things that I have really been working on and feeling a lot of success with is trying to draw in as much of the cultural materials as I possibly can, and helping kids see the connections between the ancient world and the modern world. I think that so many of the themes that we see in Suburani are things that are happening in the world today. And it's important for students to see that, none of these things are completely unique and new. I've also really been striving to just try to expose my kids to as much text as possible. And I feel like with the Suburani, there's this wonderful like main line of stories. Then there's these little ones on the side that, aren't, I love how in the teacher notes it says, if this is one to skip, skip this one. But having all those resources so that kids just see tons and tons of text is something that I've really been glowing with this year.
Nice. What about you, Sean?
One of my passions as a teacher is gamification. So I've been actually trying to take the chapters and make them into role-playing modules, something like D&D. So the kids have created characters and they're interacting in the story. So for chapter 5, we made a cursed thermi where the students had to solve problems and sort clothes and fight octopi in the latrina. And it works really well, I feel like, and the kids have gotten a little bit more like the story's coming to life a little bit more because they get to interact. So I feel like that's a big win in my book, thanks to Suburani writing a good text and writing interesting text. Uh, that's been my theme is gamifying the textbook, and I feel great about that.
You may have to tell us more about this gamification a little bit later.
Definitely.
This whole fighting in like octopi fighting, in the sewers. That's
It's
being
cool, yeah.
very interesting. So since we talked about some of the glows, what are some of the grows that you may want that you have experienced with the course?
One thing that I've had to do with my kiddos is to break the vocab for mastery into two chunks. So I usually give two quizzes per chapter, just because if I want them to know all the parts of the words, my students really cannot handle a load of more than about 10 words. So I usually break it down into two lists, like the words that show up at the beginning of the chapter and the words that show up at the end. Um, and I try to do a ton of previewing of the vocabulary. So when it shows up in the stories that they feel very comfortable with it. I really also appreciate the non-learning vocabulary lists that are available in the teacher materials. Those are a great resource so that kids aren't spending so much time looking things up. I can just provide that for them and they can use it as they need. So just trying to help my kids hone in on vocabulary and figuring out what's essential versus what's just there to help us understand an interesting story.
Awesome. Sean?
I think along those lines, yeah, figuring out how to use the vocab. I like that there's so many resources, and I try to dive in a little bit more with the automated translations, the sorting activities. And I feel like it's a wonderful thing. I'm trying to like figure out more context because I feel like sometimes with automated translations, oh, I should have an easier vocab list for kids to access so they're not spending so much time trying to recall a word that wasn't in the words for learning or making sure I hit that with the words for learning. So when we do the translation, it matches up a little bit more and it's not too far of a mental reach that they get hung up on. But in general, I feel like there's so much untapped stuff in the just in
Mhm.
the active book that I really need some time more to digest and put into the curriculum. So it's easy to just jump on and say, hey, yeah, try out the sorting, try out this automated translation, and let kids explore that way.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah, I feel like so many of my students at the high school level, they feel like it's not right unless it's perfect, and
Yeah.
trying to help them understand that part of reading is getting the gist, understanding it, getting the big ideas. If you don't remember what DU means, it's not going to make or break the sentence, but you need to understand that, key waste is accusative plural, it's the direct object, but trying to help them build that sort of like um uh that uncomfortable is okay, that it doesn't have to be every word is right every single time. Like we're reading, we're trying to get better, and really instilling that kind of grit with them is a big thing that I've been trying to grow with.
Nice. So speaking of reading, since that is the focus of this course, Melissa, you want to go ahead and share a strategy that you have found
Yeah.
successful?
Um, I have I've actually worked at Indian Hill my entire career. I student taught at Indian Hill and they offered me a job and I've been there since 27 years later. I live in the district. My son's a sixth grader. He is taking Latin, yes. But we have always been a school that believes in the reading method. We've used previous reading method textbooks in the past. So really my development as a Latin teacher has been so focused on the reading method. And Will presented something at an early Suburani seminar about how to 29 ways to approach a story. And I absolutely love his list. I'm trying to pull it up here. Can I do this? Let me see if I can share my screen here. So many of you may have seen this in different contexts. I know that Lee Grace has used it in some of their presentations. But when I'm going to a story and I don't have something already kind of geared up for it, I love looking at this list. Especially when it can be things that get my kids up out of their seats, acting it out, um, reading in pairs, videos, all these sorts of things. What happens next? I love kids to make predictions, especially like we stop in the middle of a story. Tons of drawing and cartooning of what's happening in stories. Um, Take the viewpoint of one of the characters. I worked in some extra characters once they ended up in Arl, so other people could observe what was happening. Like this guy named Marcus who works in a taberna near the theater. Everybody's hanging out there. So I love this list just to help me approach a story and help give kids a variety of approaches to a story. Um, so I'm going to share one thing that I have done recently with my students. We are still in book 2 for can't get to my task. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. We are only at the end of book 2 in my Latin 2 class. We just cannot go at a much quicker pace than that. So we just finished chapter 14 and we're into chapter 15. And the story Manere aut abire, I I like to do evidence collecting as a way for students to show understanding of the story without necessarily, writing out a full translation. So this is an activity I did with that story, um, talking about Sabina, discussing if she's going to stay or go with Popilus and Letta. And the question is, does she go to Lusitania? And then I have them read through the story and decide, is there evidence that Sabina says that she thinks she should stay? Is there evidence in Latin that she says she should go? And then having students provide a translation or paraphrase for each of those things. So they have to have some understanding of what's going on in the story in order to do this. Pretty quickly, they figure out that Popillus and Lena have no interest in her staying. They love her, but they want her to get out, and they think that she should go with Alexander. And it's interesting the discussions that come up around that. Like, how old is Sabina? Well, is this guy a good guy? He beats his slave, lots of things that come up about it. And then at the end, we do a poll. Do you think she's going to stay or she's going to go? And then what evidence made you decide on that choice? Now, unfortunately, I kind of blew it this year and told them that the last chapter of the book was called The Wedding. So they kind of figured out she's going to go. But still, the finding the evidence for the story is, I think it's a great way to get them to engage with the text and working on that. Well, you may not understand every word, but you know what's happening. You've gained understanding. So that's a technique I like to use in a lot of places, especially if there's a story where there's conflicting or differing opinions about things.
That sounds great. And I love what you said about with the reading approach, that you're not trying to get an accurate translation, but getting the idea. And I love that, just coming up with different things. And what you are sharing is also a skill that they need to develop, right? They need to find contextual.
Yeah, that's one of those things that we've seen across the board, in AP, Lit, and Lang. They've got to do that kind of stuff in their history classes. I will never not forget that now, man.
That's awesome. Should I
Yes.
stay or should I go? So, and by the way, I just put in the chat, everyone, if you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. We're monitoring the chat as well. And so earlier this week, Sean sent some stuff to us for us to kind of provide some feedback, and I thought it was so cool, this activity that he has created and he had his students do. And so I'm going to have Sean share his own little thing that he did with his students.
So one of my goals personally is gamification, but one of our district goals is project-based learning, taking a unit and making all about a project. And I had this idea in my head for a while, and actually I was lucky that the 7th grade English teachers did their own choose your adventure with the students in their English class. And so I had the idea of why not take the Sorritium chapter about escape, and we were really focusing on the Fuga readings just as a choice, and create choose your own adventure escape rooms. So like Melissa, we started off with like just some general questions about escape in general, trying to connect, their experiences to Galileo and Tellus's experiences, and try to sort of sympathize and also understand some of the major differences between, modern constraints versus ancient constraints. And then I showed him a choose your own adventure I created, which I really liked for this chapter because I think it really could highlight prepositional phrases. So we entered the cloacum. I mean, I don't know if we want to play all of it, but you could see that some of the choices really highlight, ad via dextra, ad via in via versus in aqua. And you could make all these choices. It was a fun way to kind of break things up and then, have fun, but also sort of start asking questions like, oh, wait, why is this ending changing as we're reading? Which some kids started asking right away. And if they didn't, that was okay. But then the pitch after we solved the first one was, okay, we're going to make our own choose your own adventures. And we designed them in English. And since this is my first year, I sort of let them go crazy with their choices. So we have some people escaping evil bakeries, and some people escaping classroom, and some people fighting KSI and Jake Paul and the Lunch Leaf Factory. If any of those words make any sense to you, it all feels like the middle school mind rot stuff that's just memeability. And so we went through several drafts where we got to focus on, rehash different grammatical points. And it was a great way to go back to earlier verb endings and focusing on those. So we had check-ins to see like, okay, how our verb endings look? And, a couple people had 2S, and we got to take a break and sort of rehash some of those ideas. And then we worked on specifically prepositional phrases, trying to hone in these prepositional phrases, discussing when you use accusative versus ablative. And it was a really great experience. I think the kids really liked exploring these. So here are some of my favorite examples. This one it actually features some mythology as well, which also was a struggle that I had. I should have said this as a growth thing. I feel like sometimes I have trouble putting like that last bit of mythology in here. And since I think the Minotaur and the Labyrinth were talked about in these chapters, it was like, oh, this is a great bridge between what we were doing as well. Though some kids worked in their favorite mythology. So I don't know how much time we have and what we want to go into. Uh, but you could see you're basically trying to make these choices. And our hope was to get like a larger audience that we could share this with Suburani and we could share this at a larger platform, and maybe teachers and students would like to play these or make something similar. So this is kind of like a dream come true. I'm excited to tell my kids that I shared this with an international Latin audience, some of the work that they did. Uh, but we got killed in this one. But uh, hopefully this is something that you'd like to do. And if you want, I got tons of resources that I'd love to share. And you can make some of your own. I will say that one of like the downsides is when I went crazy with the creativity, it took a lot more time than I probably would have liked. But I do have ideas to like kind of stem it down, make it a little bit more succinct and less exploring so many different words. Because at some point it was like, okay, let's see if we could come up with a word for donut or cupcake and things like that. But yeah.
Sean, if you'd love another live audience, I know some Latin 4-5 students that would love to look at these for
Oh
you.
heck yeah. Yeah. They would love it. I mean, they love showing stuff with the older kids and seeing them get to play it, and that'd be cool. I would love to share it. And if anyone wants this too, I would love to share these kids' work because they put a lot of work into them. Yeah, this was about Aeneas. This one is just a spooky, scary story where countering wolves and witches and things like that. It was around Halloween that we started, so I think that was their thematic stuff. And this one actually kind of like stayed with the theme of the sewers and features Sabina and the dogs chasing them. And even getting into like the Temple of Venus in the Cloaca, which was a great cultural connection that kid kind of remembered. And I was like, oh, I'm going to incorporate this back into it. So they did a really good job. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the fortune of seeing some of these products that the students have produced, and they're really, really amazing. And the amount of time that they spend to add details, the level of Latin that they're able to do, I just thought it was super appropriate for chapter 6. So I think one of the things that people may have questions on is how to create the links on some of these buttons. And so, Sean, I don't know if you'd be willing to
Yeah.
share. I can as well, but it's super easy on Google Slides. If you use Google Slides, it's super easy, but also you can do it if you are a Microsoft PowerPoint user as well. You just have to link to the different slides, but not sure about the Apple platform since I have not played with the Mac equivalent of PowerPoint often. So I will let the Mac users in the webinar to share that if they're able. But Sean.
Essentially, you're just inserting a link. I think Command K or Control K is whatever you would use. But if no matter what, you're essentially saying insert and link or hyperlink. and then you could type whatever slide it was in. So this was also a great moment because a lot of kids didn't understand this at first. And we taught them some basic presentation skills that they could use now in Google Slides. And I saw some people asking for this resource. Yeah, either through Suburani, or if you want to email me directly, I have a kind of a general folder that you can make copies of and pull from. But it looks really fancy for being really simple of like, oh, you're just pushing, yeah, two buttons and then typing whatever slide it goes to. And I have templates that you can use too. So if that's really tricky, I think one of the only hard parts that we did is at some point the right answer was just left. When we started off, it was just the left answer to make things simple and help kids organize. So at some point we had to say, all right, now take this box and just drag it over here and take the other box and drag it over to the other side so it's not all left. And the kids were like, oh, that's so that makes it such a better puzzle than like, okay, I'm just clicking left over and over again. But it seems like it's so fancy. And you could even do this as a card game. I had a lot of extensions in my head that I thought we could do, but ultimately, just with the time frame that we said we decided that the Google Slides were the easiest to create, edit, share. So you could have a lot of different options with these.
Awesome. Well, I do appreciate you both sharing that with us. I think these are going to be great tools once we get them up in the community resources area for our community. I think we said it many times throughout the semester doing webinars that that Latin teachers, we're just a different breed where we are willing to share. And especially Suburani users as well. And so I think Suburani users especially, they're we're just so willing to share all the time. And so I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, any questions so far for Sean and for Melissa about the activities that they have shared? I know we answered a question about hot seats. Are there any other questions as well?
There was one other thing I wanted to throw in, William. One of the, and Sean's presentation made me think about it. One of the other reasons why I really enjoy the storyline of Suburani is that it gives a lot of ways to bring in a great hook to your lesson. Like what do you want to escape from or things like that. And a lot of the professional development we've been doing as a district is involving in, lesson planning and things like this. And so one of my favorite hooks that I've used is with actually going all the way back to chapter 4, the religion chapter, where there's all this discussion of omens. And so many of our modern students don't understand the concept of what an omen is. So my hook for the day was, well, what's an omen? And here's the dictionary definition. And then I ask him, what do you think's a good omen? What do you think's a bad omen? I got some very interesting responses. Some kids really seemed to understand that it was the idea. Here, I'm going to get to my responses here. That I always tell them my favorite omen is when a good song comes on the radio first thing in the morning. Like I know I'm going to have a great day. Sometimes kids don't quite get that. They think an omen is just something that somebody does that's good. So here are some answers that my kids came up with. A good omen, giving to the poor, volunteering in a soup kitchen, 4-leaf clover, rainbow. This young man did not like his biology teacher, so a good omen is when the teacher wasn't there. This young man was very into soccer, if you couldn't tell. The Bengals winning a game, that's our local American football club. So bad omens, black cats, breaking a mirror, all these sorts of things. So that was a good way for us to, oops, sorry, I'm not the right thing here. That was a good thing for me to hook the kids in with. And then after reading the story about, Nero getting all the blood splashed on him and Sabina's, tunic getting caught on fire, I told him to be on the lookout. Like, be on the lookout this weekend for omens. Come in and tell me if you found, if you saw an omen. And it leads to really interesting discussions about what kids perceive those things to be. And any way we can bring those ancient ideas and connect them to the modern world, I think is super important.
Yeah, I agree with you.
In a similar vein, just to jump in because of the topic, I am with my Latin threes. We are at the end of book two, and one of the stories is like the Auspicia Mala, I believe, is one of the, so it's like the bad kind of omens. And what we discussed was how words in English develop different connotations. And so I put the word ominous and auspicious on the board and had them look it up because they were like, huh? And I'm like, well, if I describe something as ominous, do you think that means something good is about to happen or something bad is about to happen? And then I said, if I say that something is auspicious, what do you think? But then we talked about how this story was called Auspicia Mala, and just like about how those terms developed different meanings in English and different meaning, for different reasons versus, what would it have meant back then. So it kind of comes back to that, Melissa. They get a little taste of it in chapter 4, and then I can't remember if it's chapter 30, I want to say. But they revisit those concepts again, and that's a really cool thing to have them make those connections in English and modern stuff as well.
Nice. So I think that these are all wonderful ideas, and that again, that is one of the strengths of our course is we have creative ways of presenting different ways to read the text and have them exploit the text. And one of my favorite tools to use in the classroom is Kahoot. So how many of you guys, I'm just kind of curious, so raise your digital hand, or if you want to turn on your video and raise your hand as well. How many of you guys use Kahoot in your classroom? It's like a lot of people, and so some not so much, but if you do, it's a wonderful tool. And so we're going to play a Kahoot. So go ahead and get your devices ready. Ooh, I know, I know. You can use your computer to join. You can use your um, cellular devices, again, depending on your school policy. I know there is currently a trend to kind of not let students have their mobile devices. I taught at a school that was very pro technology, and we were very fortunate to have classroom iPad cards for the students to use. I also didn't mind them using their devices when I say they can. They have to put it away most, for the duration of the class, but for the most part, when we play Kahoot, sometimes it is easier for them to use their own devices. And so we're gonna play one. And this is based on chapter 16, Concilium, and let me share my screen and lower the volume because OMG, as you know, it's a lot of volume. Okay, share. Oop, share. Let's do Oh, look. All these wonderful characters. And again, if you don't want to participate, that's perfectly fine. I can always give the students the option. And so I see a chat, the screen went away. Share. Is it back? I hope.
I just see you. What do I did I click something? Oh, William Lee's thing. I got it.
I hope the screen is back. If not, I can stop share and share back
Oh, it
again.
was back. I'm sorry. Yes.
I was like, what's going on? All right. There you go. Okay. We're going to start in tres, dua, unas, nihil. Oh, okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because apparently silly Mr. Lee did not set up this right. So I'm going to stop the game. Don't you just love it when you don't set up the game correctly? Oh, goodness. It's like I spilled the beans. So let me go ahead and restart. And so again, this is one of those things that, like you will have to set up correctly. With the students and also with the setting of things. So done, save, preview. Okay. I think that's good. Choose game mode. Yes, yes, yes. Whew. Okay. We don't want to randomize questions. That was the issue. So we're going to start again. So let me share. And I know Kahoot has done some rearranging, so it's hard. It's like when you have to change settings, you sometimes don't remember. So apologies. But we're going to restart. And we're not going to play the whole game. I just want to kind of show some capabilities of the game. So we're going to start in tres, dua, unas, nihil. All right, now we can start again. Awesome. So this is a great way for you kind of see how everyone's doing, right? And this is one of the sequencing puzzle setups for Kahoot. And I almost said GimKit because I'm reading the chat about the GimKit as well. And so this is a great way to make reading in class fun. And so this is a question type. You can have them work in pairs. You can make it so that they don't have to enter their name because Kahoot has a setting where you can choose its own animal avatar type thing. And so that way everyone can feel included and they don't have to see their names up on the board. But again, sometimes if you want to create a little competition, you can as well. And so here's the typical Kahoot question, a multiple choice type. Kokasu as Cantabri. Okay. And so this is one of those things that you can create very easily to assess if you want to kind of ask some grammar questions and context type of thing, to review endings really quick. And so, as you can see, of the different cases, genitive was the most recent. And so I kind of embedded that in there. And then just as a reviewing the ablative case as well. And then here's the next one that's a puzzle. All right. And so I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now. So, because again, this is just, an idea that I can share with y'all. But this is one way to get the students really engaged in the reading. Again, they see themselves on the board, or you make it a competitive setting, have some sort of reward system at the end. And there are different question types that you can build in. You can have them type their own answers. Um, Hindsight is 2020. Actually kind of glad that it actually randomized the question with the first false start of the game, and you guys kind of saw the first question type, actually a new question type, which is a poll, and that last sentence, in games premium to be Erit, was a bribe. Spoiler alert for those of you who have not gotten to chapter 16, that's a bribe for Lucilius. And I created a poll question, and that's how the class will end with that, right? And the poll said, like, Lucilius will take the bribe, will take the huge bribe, or Lucilius will not take the huge reward. And so that's one of those where there's no true false answers or right answers, right? And they have to choose between those two. And so that's a great way to kind of build anticipation, making predictions to the story, which again is another way to get the students excited about reading and pulling that reading strategy in there. And so if you have not used Kahoot before, there are just lots of uses. And I saw questions in the chat about sharing activities. And yes, if I make this public, then you can search. And so you can go to a library and search for different things. And depending on how people have shared their or named their activity, sometimes it's easy to find, sometimes it's really difficult to find. And so just depends on the title. But if you email me, I can share the link with you and you can just make a copy of your own. And then that becomes your Kahoot that you can use with your students. So any questions about that? Okay. And so along the so something similar to this that I've talked about before in one of the previous webinars, and I can show a video of this as well, is dictatio currens, which is running dictation. And so this is where the students get up about, because I like them to move. I like them to have fun while doing stuff. Like they get so excited about things. And so this is a paired activity. And this is a great way to use the resources that we have called sequencing the story. And so basically you take a story, kind of like what I did, and you chop it up. And so you have the Latin. And so sometimes the focus is just getting them to see the Latin. And sometimes it's getting them like using this activity to facilitate the reading as well. And so sometimes I'll just chop up the story with short Latin sentences into little sentence strips, put them on the wall outside in the hallway. So do check with your neighbors, make sure that they're okay with kids running in the hallway, because again, it gets a little noisy. Or if you are in the classroom in a setting where you do have enough room for them to kind of move about, you can do that as well. But basically, you scatter the sentences around, you divide them into pairs, and each pair will have to decide who is going to be the scriptor first and who's going to be the cursor. And so the cursor is the runner and the scriptor is the writer. And so they also get a piece of paper. And so if the focus is on short, like so early Latin stories, they're shorter, sentences are shorter, the focus is on Latin, and so they get a blank piece of paper with blank grids on them. And so if there are 10 strips of paper outside, you give them 10 grids. And so the cursor, you'll line them up because you don't want anyone to have an advantage, but you only have to do that at the start of the activity. And so you take them outside, line them up, and their job is to find a sentence strip. And depending on how many groups you have, if you have like 15 groups, obviously you're going to have people and only 10 strips. You're going to have people looking at the same strip, which is perfectly fine. And so they run to the strip of their choice. They look at what's on the strip of paper, and then they run back and they narrate. They have to say it back. So their task is to memorize what's on that sheet of paper, on that little strip of paper. They run back, say it to their partner, the scriptor, and it is the scriptor's job to write that down, to write what they hear down on the sheet of paper. And then they do have to complete that strip, that grid, as in they can't just, they don't have to memorize all of it and to go back. So you tell them if you just memorize the first 3 words, that's perfectly fine, and then go back to find the rest of it and then go back. So it's continuous back and forth. But once that strip is done, then they switch roles. So the scriptor now becomes the cursor, and the cursor now becomes the scriptor. And so then they run back out, find a different strip of paper, come back in and say what they saw on that paper. And so vice versa. And so in the early stories where the sentences are shorter, this can be done where you have them do the Latin, and then when they have found all of the sentences, and they have to use their books, sequence the story, and then read them together, figure out what the story is saying. in book 2, later on, where the stories are much more complex, much longer, then sometimes what I do is I pair the Latin with the translation. And so on their paper, on the left-hand side will be the Latin. On the right-hand side, it could be on the second column, it could be like a closed exercise if you want to scaffold something, or it could be completely blank. And so their job is to not to memorize the translation, to bring the translation back, but they have the Latin on the sentence strip to help them. So they're looking at the Latin and they're completing the close. So and I can share that video with you. It is already 10:52, so I don't want to. I may just share that link with y'all because I think you can see it from a previous webinar. In fact, the last one that Lee Grace and I did. If you want to see that, but I can also put that link in the chat. Questions about Dictatio Corains or any of the activities or anything else? So I see in the chat, there are 2 questions for us. Are there any plans to make a case trainer very similar to the verb trainer? The second is, would it be possible to have a future training session on teaching grammar in a reading course? So I will let Will answer the first question.
Yeah, I mean, good questions, Andrew. I would say the answer to both of them is yes. We were just working last week on sort of priorities for digital developments, and certainly a sort of noun trainer, case trainer is part of that. I will see in a minute if I can sort of remember exactly where on the list it is, but it is on the list of things that we want to do. Let me see, digital priorities. But yeah, it is item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Item number 8. So it's going to will get done. It's on that list. And then the second one, yeah, I think that would be sensible. Actually, I think it would be good for us to do some sessions on how does a reading course work, sort of some of the theory and the practice behind it, and as you say, how to get the grammar out from it, and still keep it as a reading course. So I think that would be something useful for Lee, Grace, William, and I to talk about in our planning for webinars for next term, next semester. I think there's quite a number of people, I think, who are coming to using reading courses with perhaps not having had much training in how to do that, and it can it can look like there's nothing there, partly because one of the things we do when we write them is try not to write the teacher voice into the textbook. If you pick up a lot of books, and not to say there's anything wrong with that, but a lot of books will almost have they will explain it as a script that the teacher might say in advance of the grammar coming up for the students. And we don't do that. And it can give the impression that you're not meant to say anything about the grammar, which isn't the case. So yeah, let's schedule that in for sometime between January and April. I think would be good.
I just wanted to hop on and say if anyone else has suggestions like webinar topics that you want to know more about, please let us know. You can let us know in the chat, or if you think of one later and you want to shoot us an email, or if you're in the Facebook group and you want to post on there, we are more than happy to get your feedback and suggestions. We want to provide you with the training and resources that you feel like you need. So if there's something that you feel is pressing that you would like more information about, please, please, please let us know. We want to be able to provide that for you. I do also know that for all of these webinars, we always prepare more than what we probably need. So we definitely have more to share with you. So if you walk away from one thinking, I wish I heard more about blah, blah, blah. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We are more than happy to set up a Zoom with just you if you'd like, to kind of answer any questions that you have or address any of those concerns, or give you any more resources that you might need. We always want to share the resources that you are creating, like the ones that Sean shared earlier, and the ideas that y'all have. They're fantastic, and we want to help you get them out there for other teachers. So please let us know if you have something you want us to post on the community resources. We would love to showcase the work that you're doing, and we're so grateful for it as well.
Yes. And
And
speaking of feedback and providing ideas, I put in the chat a link to a Google form. It's feedback for us for the webinars, but also it does ask for, if you want to give us ideas for future webinars. I mean, if you choose no, that's perfectly okay. But again, like, give us ideas so that we know how to better serve you and help you with this course. And so it's been
can I
so,
just chip in here?
of course.
We just see, does anybody else have anything? So, I mean, it's fantastic to see Sean and Melissa, your ideas there, and William, what you've got. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to share? Or Anna, have you got a question or
Yeah, I have a
idea?
question. I wrote it in the chat. I'm afraid it's very technical and it might have a very simple answer or no answer. Sometimes when I give my homework or when I say go to this section, I need to say, can you go to chapter 21 about the language to whatever? Would it be possible to have a way, or is there already a way to just copy paste and then they
There is.
click on
Let
it
me
and it
show
takes
you.
them
Yeah.
to it? There is.
Yeah. Let
Oh,
me
that
show
would be,
you
where
how to
is it?
do it.
Because I
Yeah.
don't know if it's me
Okay.
being very obtuse here, but I can't.
Are you seeing the website there?
Yeah, wait a second. Yes.
Okay, so let's say chapter 3.
Yeah.
We open the active book.
Yeah.
Um,
There.
if let's say Anna, you want them to go to read public festivals, you
Yes.
see that those overlapping rectangles on the right hand side,
That's
overlapping squares.
that's what I thought
They're
it would be. Yeah.
okay. So if I click that, it's going to open. But the other thing that it's done is copied it to the clipboard, so I could
Oh,
paste that, and it will go directly
it's
to it.
always
So
been
you
there
could
then. Thank
right,
you.
yeah. Well, it hasn't always been there. I think we added it about 18 months ago because when I
Okay.
was covering for a colleague, I thought, oh, my, exactly as you're saying, you tell the students to do something, they do something else. So that you can paste it into a
Oh,
homework system or
thank
something.
you.
I
Should
mean,
have
it
asked before.
does it. They are still in the middle of the whole thing, so the rest of it is there. They could wander off, but it opens it at the right, at the right place. So just clicking those symbols will always, again, I can
Oh,
do it. Same.
thank you so
But you can,
much.
I don't know if it's probably too tiny to see the URL at the top, but it's just saying it's chapter 3 bar 3.
Excellent.
And the other thing is if you've got an activity and you want them to do, let's say this auto graded one, pretty much all of these activities have their own URL. So again,
Yeah.
you could just
Mm,
copy and paste that out. So does that
excellent. Thank you.
okay?
That's perfect.
Cool. All right. Um, does anybody else have something they'd like to share? And it's completely fine if not, but I thought, oh, don't, if someone's come with something they want to share, we don't want to go away without that happening. Fine. I think that's good in that case.
All right. So, well, again, as always, we so appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us this morning, this afternoon, going to evening, in UK time. And I also want to again say a big thank you to Melissa and Sean for sharing their expertise and their activities. I think again, they're so generous, as are other Suburani users. And so anything that you like to share, just, let us know. We definitely will put them up on the community resource section of the website. And so once again, we appreciate you being here this morning and afternoon. And so thank you for the privilege of your time. Take care, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Walete omnes.
Walete.
Bye.
Bye.